Yo, what's up? Josh here, Big Italian Truck. We're going to do a little video here on some of the basic settings to work with, especially when you're tuning your motors. We're going to go through some of the settings that are most important and some of the ones that are ideal for tuning specific motors, getting rid of stutter. Talk about some of the settings. If you guys, by accident, say you hit the reset button instead of save button, what settings to focus on to get your ESC to perform where it was before you hit that button by accident. We'll talk about the slider bar at the bottom of the settings page, and also copying, pasting startup tones. I know some of you guys are having some problems with it. I tested a couple different tones, and I linked a page. I linked put a link on my page website for GitHub for pretty much every RTTTL song startup tone out there, so you guys can go in and take a look at those. What you're going to start with is your battery, Wi-Fi linker. Make sure you're hooking this up. Your signal wire is your white wire, matches up to the S on the board. That's your signal. If you have it backwards, it won't connect. And your ESC, whether it's a Cupcake ESC, pretty much any Escape 32 ESC is the same process and the same settings. And then you're going to need another phone, so I'm going to use my work phone. And you'll see how I go to Wi-Fi settings, and I go to Escape 32, and there it is. Opens up your perimeters, and this is where you're going to do your tuning. Make sure arm is selected. If it's not selected, your motor will not arm, your ESC will not arm, which means it will not give power to your motor, or you'll have pretty much no startup beeps, no nothing. Make sure that your damp is also selected. That's for braking when it lets off the throttle. If that is not selected, you'll get a little bit of rollback. Sort of recalling in downhill control pretty much is pretty much what it is. Rev direction is just reverse direction. Reverses motor direction. Some guys can do it in their transmitters. Some guys don't want to do that. They're already in their settings. They want to reverse the direction of the motor. That's where you can do it. Brush mode, obviously you guys know what that is. You're gonna run brushed. I have photos on the website as to how to plug in the motor. It's pretty straightforward. ESC has 3 pins. Middle pin is your power, is your VIN, or your voltage output. Excuse me. And then I use the left pin because that PH 2.0 2P plug plugs right in directly. And then you go to select brush mode, and that will wipe out all your sinusoidal startup, basically your slow startup settings for this, and basically give it a default for brush motors. And we'll talk about that in another video, and we'll go through the settings for that one as well. Let's go to, timing. So it defaults at 16. I've noticed most of the micro crawler motors like it between 16 and 27, 28 for timing. The icing V1 and V2 is 25, 26, and 27. I've noticed it's pretty good around that. That's your advancement on your timing. And then we'll talk about the sine range. So this is your sine startup. And your sine range, hold on a second here. Sorry, guys. All right, so it equals 25. So this reserves 25% of the throttle for smooth sine wave startup. Perfect for low speed crawling. So 25 is your max. You can go all the way to 0 for your sine range. But I would start at 25 and see how it does. That's your maximum range of startup. So I would keep that at 25. Some motors like at 20, 22, doesn't matter, 24. You're going to notice a difference when you go to test it and tune it. We'll go to sine range, sine power. Right now it defaults at 8. The higher the number, guys, on the sine power, which right there is 8, the higher the number, the more heat you have. So basically I like to run that at 8, between 8 and 11. If you notice it heating up, you can always lower the number. And there are other settings that can combat this too as well. So if you feel like you need a little more throttle on startup or a little more power on throttle, excuse me, on startup, You can raise the other settings, and we'll get to that. But basically, so what happens is, if you notice a stutter and you feel like you need a little more power, you can bump it up 1 or 2 notches, 1 or 2 numbers. And if it runs hot, you can just lower it. We'll talk about the, where are we? Frequency min. This is minimum PWM frequency. So minimum frequency is about 24 kilohertz, and then maximum is 48. This ensures smooth operation across all RPM ranges. These guys, I've noticed, like, say the V1 icing, for example, was 32 on the minimum and 64 on the maximum. The numbers tend to be higher on smaller motors. Anything from 2800, I would say, or 2000 kV up to 3500 kV. The number is going to be a little higher. Larger the motor, larger the stator, like anything 110 scale, you're going to want lower numbers. So you can do 16 and 24, or you can do 24 and 48. I would just leave it basically where it is now, and then kind of play with the other settings first before getting into the minimum and maximum frequencies. Then you have the duty minimum, so minimum throttle power. So that's at 1. Now keep in mind, so this sets starting power when the throttle is first applied. The higher the number on this, guys, it will create more heat. So be mindful of that. If for any reason you have a stutter and you cannot get rid of it, and say you're at 3500 on your stall protection, which is another setting we'll get into, and you're maxed out your power, and you're like, you know what, I'm getting a little bit jitter in the beginning and I can't get rid of it, bump that duty min up to 2 or 3. I wouldn't go any higher than like 4 or 5, because then you'll notice it start to heat up. But what you can do is you can also lower your sine power. So say you're up at 5 on the duty min, and you're noticing some heat, and you're at 10 on sine power, lower your sine power down to like 8, and that will combat that heat issue. That'll help out a lot more for that. Duty maximum throttle power, leave that at 100. You're not going to need much. You're not going to need to change that. That's just your throttle maximum power range. And that starts there. So then we're going to go to duty spin. Right, where are we? Yeah, duty spin up. Can't see my phone. Sorry, guys. Trying to look through over the phone while I'm doing this. I should just be looking at the phone that's recording the other phone. So this is your maximum spin up power set at 15. It's default. You can change that if you want to. You don't really have to. I haven't played much with the duty spin up power. Haven't really had to be honest. The new Rev, like Rev 14.5, is phenomenal. Anything from, I would say, 14 and up is pretty basic settings. Work for a lot of different varieties of motors. So I haven't really had to play around with a lot of stuff. Mostly just the sine range, sine power, a little bit on the freak min and max, but mostly the stall protection. That's mostly the one that you're going to want to focus on. And that's pretty much covers a lot of the motors out there. The ROPs, now when I send these out, I send these out at 16 timing, 20 on the sine range. Sine power is usually between 8 and 10. Freak min I don't even touch. Most of the settings I don't even touch. Forward and reverse, obviously I selected throttle mode, etc. Protect stall is your stall protection. I set that to about 3,300 sometimes, depending on what motor I'm testing with. Pro temp, that's another one we'll get into eventually, and then protect voltage. But let's go back to the list here. So that, go back to it here. So the duty SPUP, that's your startup, your spin up power. Your spin up power, excuse me, defaults at 15, right? Okay, so where are we? This helps the motor start turning. Avoid going up too high to reduce heat. So another one of those guys that will cause heat issues if you go up too high on those numbers. So keep those numbers pretty much where they are. I wouldn't even start getting into it until you actually have to, or until you learn more about the settings. But you really don't really have to. Then you have duty ramp, which this softens the throttle punch at low RPMs. The lower the values for 10 scale, higher the values for microcrawlers. So your duty ramp is another one. If you notice a stutter, you can also apply duty ramp, and that just applies your spin up power a little bit, or spin up, yeah. So I lost my place on my notes here. Excuse me for a second there. All right, here we go. Spin up power equals, here it says 10. I don't know why. Why do I have it as 10? Oh, I'm sorry, duty ramp. Boo! Oh my God, so sorry. 15 to 30. Sorry, it's 15 to 30 on that. Softens the punch. I usually keep it about 15. You can raise it up to a 20. I've gone to 20 before, and I've not had to go any higher than that. Then you got your duty rate. Duty rate is defaulted at 30. Standardized, it used to be 25. This controls how quickly the motor ramps up when accelerating. Lower if your motor stutters. So that's another one. I don't touch it. I never play with duty rate that much. But if you do notice a stutter and you've already gone through the rest of the settings, you can go through the duty rate. You can lower that number. Like 30 is maxed out. So you can go down to 25 and try that. Or you can try single digits too as well. So you want to go to 29 or 28 until you get that stutter to kind of tune it out. That's where I would go. I would start with that. Now let's go to part 2. My notes here. All right. So let's talk about the drag brake. All right. So drag brake is not needed for anything with a worm gear. So if you're running an axial SCX24 base axle, Super 8s, pretty much anything out there that runs a worm gear, it's cut to not need a drag brake. The way the gears are cut is they're made to go one direction only. So I wouldn't even play around with that on the duty drag, to be honest, unless you're running like a ring and pinion on a Red Cat 18, TRX 4M. I think they have ring and pinions on those. Anything 16 scale, 12 scale, and obviously 10 scale, you're going to want to play with the duty drag. 40% is usually where I start at, and then go from there. Work my way up depending on the incline and what kind of rocks I'm going to be crawling over. That's where I start at that one. Excuse me. So, averages between, I would say 30 to 70%. 100% if you're like running a really heavy truck. If you're running like a 10-pound truck and you still can't hold at 100%, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. LOL. No, you can 70%. I've noticed 70% is good up to about 9 pounds. Anything heavier than that, you might need the full 100%. But I haven't really needed to go that high before. I think 70 is where I maxed out at. 65, 70%. We'll go to, sorry guys, getting tired here. We'll go to duty lock. Duty lock, this enables drag brake, providing strong holding power on hills. Make sure if you're running I would run duty lock, especially with ring and pinion. Like I said, you're not going to need it on worm gear, but on ring and pinion, if you're running, say you're running 30%, hit that duty lock button, and that's active drag brake. That will literally stop your truck from rolling backwards. It'll as soon as the motor stops spinning, that duty lock kicks in. Boom, truck stops. So if you're noticing you're getting some rollback, hit that duty lock button, and that should adequately stop that truck from rolling backwards and to give you that nice lock in place. It's usually off the throttle. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time for the motor to stop spinning, so you might notice a little rollback until it kicks in, because that's the motor still spinning internally, even though there's no power applied to it or no frequency applied to it. So give it like a split second, and it should stop your truck for you. Now we can play with let's see, we got duty lock, throttle modes. This is what I was talking about earlier. Forward and reverse for crawlers. That's all you need. Forward and reverse for your crawlers, guys. So I'm going to do that. I'm setting this up for a customer, so I'm using his ESC to make sure I still have battery power. No heat. Good. I've had it plugged in for about 15 minutes now so far. Let's see. Okay, so I'm setting this up so I don't want to forget anything. All right. So let's talk about Throttle mode, throttle calibration. Let's see, where are we at now? Do we skip one? We did skip one. Where is... All right, guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. The battery died. Tuning does take a lot out of your batteries. So make sure if you are tuning, have a couple fresh packs on you. Because if you're tuning for about 15 minutes and you're trying new things and you're saving it and you're trying it, you're trading it, saving it, when your battery dies, it will disconnect you from the Wi-Fi linker. So make sure that you keep a couple batteries on you, especially on the small packs. Right now I'm running a 800 milliamp 40C 11.1 volt 3S battery instead of the little 180 mAh, sorry. So I can get a longer runtime out of this battery when I'm tuning. That's another thing too. So if you are tuning on the bench or you get some obstacles and you're just kind of playing with the tunes a little bit, make sure you are running a longer life battery. Those little micro batteries don't last very long. You might get, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on what kind of terrain you're crawling on. I like to stay usually around 200 milliamp and higher. I know that there are some guys who run a lot of trail stuff and they'll 350 to 450, sometimes 500 milliamps, depending on the size of the battery and what they can fit on their truck. All right. So sorry about that. Like I said, had to change batteries, get some water. Let's get back to it. Let's get back to the settings. All right. So throttle reverse. Say you want to cut your throttle down. I believe it's by 25%. I haven't needed to use it yet because I don't do a lot of comping. I do mostly trailing. So sometimes I do need. So say you can want to set this to 2. You save it. Now that'll cut your throttle down to about 50%, I believe. I'll look into it a little more to make sure I get that right. But I'm pretty sure it's 50%. And then 75% for the number 3. It only goes up 1, 2, and 3. And I think it cuts it down. It still leaves about 25% of reverse throttle. So say you want to max it out and you are at a 2. You can go to a 3 on the reverse throttle, and that will bring it down to about 75% power down. So you still get about 1/4% of reverse throttle. So it slows down your throttle reverse throttle. But you still have your full top speed and your full power and torque going forward over obstacles. It slows down your reverse a little bit more, so you can have a little better control, especially in gates or in comp situations. So that's that. Now let's go to, lost my place again. Good God. There we go. Throttle calibration. Okay. So throttle. Oh God. Getting tired. I knew I should have did a 2-part video on this instead of it being 25 to 30 minutes long. Trying to explain this. So you do the log, you get your throttle configuration. All right, so let's go to throttle calibration. So this automatically calibrates your throttle. I would keep that checked. So this enables reverse control. Okay, right here, calibration. This lets the ESC automatically detect your radio's throttle range. When you are binding a new build, make sure that all your settings on your transmitter for this channel that you're binding are set to default, like it's 0. Make sure they're all zeroed out, because I've seen a lot of guys who have say they're running a receiver out of another truck and that build was taken apart and they parted it out to build something else. They didn't reset their values on their transmitter, and then they're trying to hook it up onto this, and they're having some weird issues. Always reset that receiver and that profile back to default and then start fresh. Make sure you're steering your throttles at 0. Because the ESC will automatically detect your throttle range, but if your throttle is set, say 2 buttons, 2 hits higher, it's going to think that that's where it's going to start at. So make sure that is set at 0% and then start there. Then you can get into, let's see, next one will be throttle range, right? Throttle range. So this is your minimum full reverse. This is your middle equals 1500 microseconds, which is neutral. And then your maximum equals 200 microseconds full forward. I use these more for brush motors. I don't even use the throttle range really on the sinusoidal startup like on brushless motors. Don't really need to, because you get that slow crawl anyways, and then you're going to tune out any stuttering, any transition from startup mode to trap mode, which is like basically like you're starting to slow crawl and then all of a sudden you kick in to basically like second gear almost, like in a car. You want to smooth that out with your settings, like stall protection, sign power, stuff like that. So I don't really get into a lot of the throttle range on this stuff. On a brush motor, it's different because you don't have the sinusoidal startup. You don't have that slow creep startup like turtle mode on the motor. You just have, full torque all the time. So this is where that throttle range comes into play, playing around with these numbers. Input and telemetry. This is good for those guys who are running transmitters that have the ability to do telemetry. The ESC has another pad on it that I don't solder anymore. You guys can solder if you want to. There's a telemetry pad under that red output lead. I don't know if you can see it. Kind of can't see it. I'll show you a board afterwards. Just tell you what I mean. A lot of the transmitters out there don't have telemetry, especially GT5s, GT3s, Traxxas. I don't think the new Mias one does. I know like Sanwa, Futaba, the Radiolink MT12 has full telemetry, but you have to use ERLS. You can't use the foreign one. I don't think that has telemetry unless it does, and I could be mistaken. Don't quote me to that. But I do like the Fly Sky Noble has telemetry, but you need to have a telemetry receiver, a receiver that has active telemetry built into it to be able to run that. And then you can run like a separate lead going from that middle pad to the receiver in a telemetry port. So we're not going to get too much into that because a lot of the guys don't run it, especially with the GT5s. Telemetry mode, we won't need that. We're going to get into, where are we? Let me go throttle min max, min max, input. I'm going to skip over some of the other stuff like the telemetry modes, KISS modes. We'll get into those later on. I just want to give you guys more of a basic rundown of some of the key features and some of the key settings that you guys will play with. Telemetry poles. Poles is a big one. So I've noticed that sometimes lowering the poles even lower than what the motor is designed for. So say my V1 icing is a 12-pole motor. I've noticed that it likes it around 10 poles. It acts better. So basically poles is used to calculate motor RPM for telemetry, based on your motor's total pole count. But for some reason, the firmware likes it at a lower pole count. I just use it, and sometimes I don't even play with it. I've noticed that if I raise the power up a little bit, it kind of tunes it out a little bit more. Stall protection is going to be basically the next one we're going to talk about. That's going to be your best friend, and what you're going to want to play with is more of that rather than playing with the poles. So you can leave it at 14 and then just play around with stall protection, and that'll pretty much zero this out. Stall protection is when you are coming up to an obstacle and your truck is creeping in an obstacle and you start to hit it and you start to get that stutter. That's your stall protection. That is stalling the motor out from continuous forward motion. So basically, you want to play with that. Depending on what motor you have, it could be between 1500 and 3500 is the max on that. Set just above the RPM where sine transitions to trap mode. So that's that shift I was talking about, going from sine startup, which is the slow startup of that motor, sinusoidal, and it's going into trap mode. So it's transitioning basically like a car. You're going from first gear into second gear, basically. That's where you're going to want to play around with that and to find where that's going to work the smoothest. So basically, a good way to test it is to hold down your truck a little bit, put a little pressure on it, and then try to give it forward throttle. Another easy way to do it too, I haven't told a lot of people about this, but this little slide bar at the bottom is your slider. So that won't give you steering, but that'll give you forward throttle only. That's a good way to test. You don't have to keep unplugging your receiver wire from the Wi-Fi linker and plugging it into your transmitter to test any settings you've changed. You can just press save, slide that little bar to the right a little bit. It'll arm the motor, like we talked about before. It'll arm your minimum throttle startup, and then that'll start progressing that truck forward. That's a good way to test out and tune out your protect stall. So what I do is I take a big tire, or take like a big box or a battery, and I put it in front of the truck, and I use that slider bar. It allows your truck to creep forward until you get to that obstacle. If it starts to stutter, I play around with protect stall, or I play around with sign power, or duty ramp is another one. Say you're at 15 on your sign power, which is max, and you're still noticing a little bit of a stutter, and you're at 3500 on your protect stall, depending on what motor it is. Raise your duty ramp a little bit, raise it up to 5, 10, 15. You can raise your duty min. It's another one that combats stutter, but it also creates more heat. So then if you're going to raise your duty min to say 2 or 3, which changes the amount of throttle that's applied, or position of the throttle when it's applied, to get your truck going and get it going smoother, then you can lower your sign power, to combat the heat. But excuse me, stall protection is going to be your best friend. That's what you're going to play with the most. Definitely until your motor is fully tuned. Temperature limits, another one. 80 to 85 degrees Celsius. I usually set these out of the house or out of the shop, going to you guys between usually around 80. This is where if your ESC gets to the point where it hits that temp of 80, because it's a hot day and you're really going hard on it, and you're stuck in the little ruts and crevices, and you're just putting a lot of heat on that motor, a lot of heat on the ESC itself. Once it hits 80 degrees Celsius, it's going to shut down to protect the internal components on the board. That's something you're going to want to have set for sure. And another one is LiPo cutoff. Make sure you guys are setting this 33 to 35. So this is 3.3 to 3.5 volts per cell. I usually use 33. So what I do is I set this at 33. Boom, that's 3.3 volts. That's the lowest I want to go. I don't want to go any lower than that. Now, there are some guys who use 2.8 volts, 28. Sure, you can. I've tested the theory. It actually works. 28 is 2.8 volts. I've gotten a battery down to 2.8 volts, and I was able to successfully bring it back up to a normal range. But I wouldn't suggest going that low. I would suggest keeping it at 33. Even I've seen some guys use 30 and 32, but 33 to 35 is your safe range. So when I send them out, I usually send them out between 33 and 35, depending on that day. And I'm like, oh crap, did I send it out? Yep, I'll recheck it. It's at 33. Because what happens is you can over discharge the battery, and then it no longer. So on a LiPo, it becomes unsafe to operate at a lower discharge. If it goes below the ring back voltage per cell, sometimes there's a way to fix it. It's not very safe. I've done it a few times where I've plugged a LiPo into a NIM charger for about 5 minutes outside on the pavement away from the house on an extension cord, just to bring it back up to a charging level that your charger can detect, which is usually around 2.8 volts, to be honest. I've got them down to 2.2 volts per cell. I'm like, oh shit, that's it's way too low. And I've just had to kind of throw them away, put them in a bucket of water, let it sit outside, whatever, and then throw it away. Or like we used to do is take it to the gun range and hold them up on the back hill and then shoot them. But yeah, we won't get into that, those days anymore. But fun stuff. And then your startup, you can also set protect cells, but I would just leave that at 0. And your protect current also. The more you leave it 0, the more that the firmware detects automatically. So I would even play with protect cells. I would just leave that right at 0. It'll cut off. It'll automatically detect your cells so it won't matter. You can set it if you want to 3 cell, 2 cell, but you really don't have to. Music, another one. So this is where, so I use this box here to put in my music tone or my tone startup. Some of the guys will come up here and use music. Now, you can copy and paste it right here in the box. You're gonna want to copy and paste the whole code with the name. So when you're on the link on the website that takes you to the GitHub to all the ringtones that are available, make sure you're copying and pasting the name with the colons as well, all the way, and copy and paste it in here and save it. If you were trying to play it and trying to save it, it won't save. So you have to make sure you clear it out, paste it, save it in there, go back to the settings page, finish up your settings, save it. Now what I do is I always power cycle the ESC. You have to. You will not be able to just plug your motor, unplug it, plug it back in. You have to power cycle your ESC for the changes to take shape, or for that music to be able to, kind of set itself in there. If not, it won't work, and it will not work on brush motors. Brush motors do not have that frequency, the same frequency as the Sinusoidal does. The startup does, so that frequency is different. So startup tones do not work on a brush motor, only on brushless. Startup music and volume, LED behavior. These are optional features. If the ESC is built with LED, you can turn that LED on, especially on the fruitcake. There's there's 2 LED options. The first 2 boxes are options. If you are, say you're connecting, say the ESC is powered on, but it's not connecting to the receiver, your light will flash. It'll tell you that it's not connecting. Once it's a solid light, then it's connected to the receiver. So it could be either issue with your battery, it could be your receiver is not connected to your transmitter, etc. So those tone lights definitely come in handy on the larger ESCs. The micro ESC does not have one. There will be one added in the future, guys, to the smaller ESC that we are also working on. It's kind of in testing phase right now. Should have a couple of those samples coming in pretty soon. But yeah, so that's basically your basic settings. But like I said, your basic settings out of the box are going to be your sine range, which I usually set out of the box about 20. You guys can play with that. Put up to 25 if you want to. Sine power. I mean, if you have to. 25 is your max. And then play with your protect stall and your pulse. I mean, you can leave the pulse at 14 and tune it out. Not a big deal. So out of the package, you want to play with this. Make sure these are set. Make sure forward and reverse is set. If this is set to forward, you won't get any throttle. I've noticed a lot of guys hit the reset button and they set it. It defaults to forward only. And they're like, oh, they call me up, hey, we have no throttle. Make sure throttle mode is set to forward and reverse for crawlers. Like I said, if you're running a basher, forward, brake, reverse. If you're running like a track car, like a race car, you can do forward and brake because you're not going to go reverse. You're only going to go forward. Especially on the mini, the Mini Zs or the, I tested the ESCs in a low C micro T, and I have it set on forward and brake. I don't really need reverse unless I'm actually backing up, but on a track, you're pretty much going forward anyways and slowing down. But forward and reverse on crawlers only. And then that's basic settings. If you guys have any questions, oh yeah, firmware. If you guys want to update the firmware, all the files are available for free. Obviously, this is open source firmware, so everything's open for free on the GitHub under Escape32. I'll show you another video. I have another video actually on there on how to update your firmware. I'm probably going to refresh it and post it up to my YouTube channel, which I need to start using a lot more. So that's why I'm kind of making this video as an explanation to you guys on like what some of these settings mean and what settings to focus on right out of the package. But like I said, I test these, I tune them a little bit, basically, and then I put them in a package and ship them to you guys. So right out of the package, you guys should be able to plug that in and go, unless you're using a brush motor. Then you will have to come in to the settings page, Let's bring it up. Press the brush box, which turns off your timing, turns off your sign, your freak min max, because you're not going to need those. I'm sorry, your freak max stays on because you're still going to need to play with that a little bit. I've noticed the lower the numbers, the better. And then you can play with your throttle, mid, max, range, everything. But it does turn off stall. Not going to need stall. There is no stall protection. There is no stall needed on a brush motor. But you're still going to need your pro temp, your pro voltage, and of course your BEC. So the BEC is adjustable from 5.5 volts all the way up to 8.4 volts, depending on if your servo can handle it. Now, our servos that we sell is the cake. It can handle 8.4 volts, so you can go all the way up. Press your save button, boom, done, ready to go. You notice at the bottom, you're showing your current. You won't notice the current unless your motor is hooked up and you're trying to give it full throttle, or if you're using the slider bar, you can notice how much current you're drawing from that motor. Your temp right now is at 33 Celsius. That's perfect. Even on a hot day under heat, that should be up around 45, 46, maybe a little higher, depending on how much crawling you're doing. If it goes any higher than that, then you'll start noticing like it starts cutting the power down a little bit. And then you have your voltage. So that's your voltage right there. That's what's being fed in, is your 11.1 volts or 11.3 volts. It fluctuates. And this is your Escape 32, Rev 14.5, and this is your target file. So if say you want to update your ESC and you're like, oh, what target do I need? Always go to your settings page first. Verify that you are running Escape 2. Each ESC will have its own target name. So 60 amp is Escape 1. We had some in the past that were Escape 3. We had some Escape, older versions of Escape 2. This is always going to be Escape 2 on the cupcake. That's just what's going to happen. And then so you're going to come in here. You're going to go to your the Escape 32 website. You're going to download your target from the asset list to your phone, save it to your files or your laptop. Come over here, choose file. Now, I don't have any files, I don't think, in here, saved in here. Let's see. Maybe I do. No, that's my work phone, so I don't really use this very often. But you're going to find it in the file list. You're going to click on it, load it in there. Leave firmware alone. And then protection, you want to do bootloader only. Do not set full protection. Because if something happens, it will lock you out. You will not be able to re-flash your firmware. You have to send it back to me. I'll have to wipe it and then send it out to you guys already, flashed again. You can skip the integrity check. You don't need that. And then you press update. And once the green bar is done, your firmware has been updated. Go back to the settings page. And the problem is, not the problem, but one of the things I've noticed is people will flash the update and then unplug it, plug it back into the truck, and they say, oh crap, I have no throttle mode, or I have no startup, I can't go anywhere. What's going on? Did I break it? No. Updating your firmware wipes out all your settings. So basically, I gotta set this. Let me save it here so it keeps screwing up. I don't want to send this out to the customer and be like, oh crap, it's in brush mode. It wipes out all of your settings. So basically you want to reset this again. So I'm going to set it to 25. I'm going to set this to forward and reverse. I do basic, like I said, I do basic settings. I do 3300 on the stall. That's a pretty basic number for most of the micro motors out there. And I'll set the temp to 80 and the LiPo cutoff to 33. And then this I usually leave 5.5 volts usually is where I'll leave it at. Sometimes 6.5 if I'm testing with a different servo. I go through all the settings on each ESC and test out functionality on a motor, on a servo, just to make sure I'm able to power everything completely. But yeah, all right guys, so that's basically your basic settings on these guys. If you guys have any questions, you can always reach out to me at Big Kid Tiny Trucks. On my website, there is a chat bar. You can reach out there. You can reach out on Big Kid Tiny Truck on Facebook. I have a group. You can also reach out on the Escape 32 group that me and Black Widow RC have. You can reach out there via chat, or you can even message me privately on Instagram or on Messenger on Facebook. But yeah, or you can even email me. There's plenty of ways to get a hold of me if you guys need help. But I've taken enough of your time now, so I'm going to post this video up probably tomorrow. I'll put the two videos together because, like I said, I had to take a little break in the middle, and I will clean it up a little bit more. Then you guys will be good to go. I'll have this up and loaded up to YouTube for you guys to take a look. All right, guys, have a great night. Thanks so much.